virus, but post-coronavirus. Guys, I think the world is going to change. I think things are going to be very different when we're beyond this point. And I got some guys in via video because we're social distancing ourselves to discuss it. But first, the intro music. Hello, God bless, and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty, and this is the Godlogic Project.
Shut up, Kevin.
I'm Kevin Haggerty. That's Mike Houston telling me to shut up like he does every week. Not in studio, but still live via the Zoom app. I have a couple of guys that I work very closely with. These guys are guys that I trust and know, and I really appreciate their taking the time to do this with me tonight, and their opinions I certainly value. We got, first off, Jim Howard. Introduce yourself, Jim Howard. You're a regular on the show.
Hey, Kevin. Yes, Jim Howard with Trinity Security Allies, and I'm a security consultant for churches and just about anybody else that might be interested in it.
All right, so that's very cool. Young Christian Ferris down below, by my screen anyway, by America's screen. Christian, introduce yourself, buddy.
I'm on top up on my screen. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Well, so. America's looking at you, and you're on the bottom in our screen.
Fine. Christian Ferris, Next Level Church and Elite Warriors Mastermind Program, and of course, Kevin's boss.
That's right. He is training me to be an elite warrior someday. Finally, my Roman gladiator outfit is going to really not look so silly when I leave the house.
One day you're going to
starts.
One day you're going to get one of these shirts.
Yeah, I have. It'll be my Christmas bonus. It could be my Christmas bonus. I'll cut the sleeves off and notch the neck, though. So I'll probably ruin it.
Right.
All right. So
I love it.
We have obviously today is March 25th. We're a week or two into this coronavirus. I personally think we're a couple of weeks away from really seeing any kind of major progress in what's going on. In other words, I think we're in for a rough couple of weeks. It's going to get worse before it gets better. For me, I've been self-quarantining as much as possible. I still run out, get to the store. The stores, while maybe a quarter of the stuff is not there, eggs and pasta and stuff like that. The store last night, I went to Winn-Dixie, and it was pretty normal. There was no riots or anything like that. But I think moving forward, we're going to see a different economic paradigm. I think perhaps even our how we worship, our churches, our houses of worship could be applied differently. People may get used to this after a month or two of this. And the other thing would be our education system. I'm beginning on Monday AJ's going to homeschool with his teachers online. And I'm wondering, when this is all over, Christian, you can go first, but when this is all over, what do you think are some of the bigger changes we might see? How does this pandemic affect us moving forward? How much of a game changer is this, do you think?
Yeah. Well, first of all, am I coming through clear? Because I have a real low and unsteady. It keeps saying my connection's unstable. Is it clear for you?
Yeah, it's working so far. Your video's a bit glitchy, but you can hardly notice. The audio's fine.
Okay, perfect. So, I think you and I have talked about this before. We've certainly talked about it in our staff gatherings and stuff, that if you interrupt or change people's patterns anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, they're going to form new patterns. And so I don't care how well we bounce back from learning how to interact on social media. Even your generation, Kevin, my generation, they're learning how to economic upturn. There's going to be, life is going to look different, and church is going to be different, and how people, get their education, it's all going to be different. So the question is how will we maximize in that sort of quote unquote new world as things have shifted and morphed?
Yeah, it's going to be, what we don't know is, even like with the virus, it's worse what we don't know than what we do know. But then if we project past beyond this, like we're trying to do for this hour, I could see a few things being very, very different. Now, my situation, my life is probably very different than a lot of people. I'm a single parent who works from home anyway, so school and AJ from home is not a big transition for me. I don't know how many people, we're talking 20 or 30% unemployment rate after this. A lot of people are going to be in position to handle this stuff online. Jim, what do you think about all that? I know.
Well, I mean, going back to something that Christian said before we came online, I think he's very right and very important on something. I have a friend of mine who works in the car business, and he was talking about how these online car sales companies that are coming about now, that to where a person can go out online, pick the car that they want, pick the financing that they want, and they don't have to go to a place and sit there for 4 hours listening to a guy that, oh, we can't do this, or let me go talk to my manager and all these different things like that. He goes, this online car business, Carvana is one of them. He says it's going to
Carvana, right?
They're going to bankrupt the car business. So what I've kind of noticed, and this is the old saying, necessity is the mother of inventions. People are going to figure out that they can probably have the workforce work at home using a product like Zoom, not have to rent these big office spaces, give them kind of some sort of allowance to build their office at their house. Why come in? Why do the unless you got to have a monthly meeting or something like that? I think you're going to see a huge change in the market and how we function and operate. And you were talking about school. I have a daughter in college over in Embry-Riddle, and they sent them home. Except for the flight guys who have to fly over there, they're doing all their stuff online. And they just came out tonight and said, "Hey, we're just going to do a pass-fail. No grade point average, anything like that. Let's just do a pass-fail." Well, Jessica's kind of looking at this going, I want to keep my grade point average up. Yeah. I want to show my grade point average. I don't want this pass-fail stuff. So, there's some things that bad things and some good things that are probably going to come out of this, but we're going to see a change. Well, and I think we're going to see a big change, and I'm afraid of how it's going to affect the churches. I really am.
If you talk about kind of a pass-fail system in school, which is bizarre and it seems unnecessary given the and I'm not in the education business, but it seems kind of unnecessary. Most of AJ's schooling in the 5th grade at a charter school is done on a computer anyway. I get his grades as soon as they're submitted. I get an email what he got on a math test or what he got for the day. So that school is particularly positioned for doing online schooling. The kind of makes you wonder what they do in the classroom all day if everything's being done online. But you go to a pass-fail system. It sounds great to the kids that might pull a C. What about the kids that might pull an A? That's not terribly fair. Do you really think we're going to be seeing like a 30% unemployment rate? That seems unbelievable.
I mean, in the Great Depression, it was a 20%. Yeah. I mean, if that does happen, it's unprecedented, and our country's never seen it. And it will be there will be complete carnage in the blue, middle class America, complete carnage. And Jim's just said something really important. I'm concerned about the churches, and of course, people know that when you move into that level of unemployment and that type of carnage in the economic system, the very first thing that they stop doing is their charitable donations to the church or to any type of 501c3, which, Kevin, this to be true. Jim, you and I have never had an opportunity to talk about this, but a couple of years ago, the father told us that there was something was going to be shifting and happening. We actually called it a seismic shift was coming to the American church. And so we started 2 years ago removing all of our staff back into the bivocational world, starting businesses and companies so that our church wasn't relying on donations to keep it alive. If you look at the American church graph right now, and you take a chart, a pie chart of their income and inflow, income and outgo, you'll see that 85 to 90% is to campus needs and staff. Really? And so the script is really off as far as what I believe God intended for the first century, or the original intent for the church. And so he's bringing an interruption to two things right now. He's bringing an interruption. I'm speaking specifically in the church. He's bringing an interruption to the model, and he's bringing an interruption to the cult of personalities. And so when you realize that you can have church in your home and gather, as a lot of people from Next Level did on Sunday, they were gathering 9 or less in their home. And yes, I happened to be on the screen. We weren't doing a big stage thing. We're not doing any of that. We were just doing some basic teaching, and we had, our slides on the teaching screen and all that. But they could watch anybody. They could watch Gary Baldus in Zephyr Hills, or they could have watched, Stephen Furtick in North Carolina. Like, they could have watched anybody. And so there's two major interruptions that are happening here. And I believe we're in a critical season where the American church pastor has to really ask, how are we going to respond to this? Because if we were to be honest, we've been doing a lot of stuff and then asking God to bless it. Yeah. And I believe he's interrupting that so we can kind of pause, pump the brakes, and say, okay, God, what is it that you're blessing? And let us pursue that and let us go after that. And so there is a major shift that is happening, that is coming. And the churches who have over-leveraged, first of all, we're over-leveraged economically. There is a liquidity crisis right now in the United States of America. When the Feds dumped in the very first part of this journey, they dumped $195 billion into the system, and it came in one afternoon and it was gone in one afternoon. And the reason that it was is because all your high-level guys were taking a draw on their credit. So Boeing pulled $50 billion. The malls pulled $112 billion. The money that was put in within 30 minutes was all drawn because these high-level corporations were freaking out. There's a liquidity crisis. Well, there's going to be the same kind of crisis in the American church because 90% of it, specifically in the mega church world, are over leveraged, and it's not a great model because it's all determined on people giving tithes and offerings. It's a donation model. So you have a crisis like this, guess what goes away? Your model is destroyed.
And there's bigger churches, and Jim, you can speak into this because your church compared to our church is a mega church. They're not in position to take this kind of hit, is what I'm hearing. So they have mortgages and payrolls they got to meet and won't be able to meet. I don't think financially we're going to take a hit. We may be in a little better position, having played small ball the last 3 years. But what do you do with a bigger church that relies on that money? Even corporate donations to 501(c)(3)s. I don't think you're going to be seeing it, Jim.
Well, I'm glad you asked me that because I kind of wanted to. The Christian said something there that what we have to understand is that our church went through a huge shift because we were like way top heavy as far as management went. And when the new, pastor came in, a lot of people were let go. And then the second thing he started doing, he started looking at ways for the church to make money besides the tithes that are coming in. And like we now have on campus a CrossFit that we've opened up to the public to allow people to come in and work out. And we have trainers that have been trained through the church. And we're looking at different ways. I mean, we're sitting on a huge piece of property that we're looking on ways of maybe adding something to it. I mean, I was looking at a church on East Lake Road where they put a cell tower in, where they're getting a monthly, they rent that piece of property to the cell tower. So that's money that's coming into the church. And so, I like what you're talking about getting it online. But the problem that I have with that's not biblically based. When you say 9 or 10 people, okay, maybe that's fine. But you really need to be in the fold and in the flock and the organization. It's a huge difference when you walk into the church than sitting at home with 9 or 10 people watching a video.
Yeah.
Big difference there. In fact, that's kind of why we had a satellite church out in Spring Hill that didn't work because people felt like they were going into a movie theater and watching a production instead of actually having a church service. They want to be able to reach out to that pastor after it's over with and have fellowship with him. They want to go in and tell their problems. They want the pastor to pray for them. And it's very difficult to do if we're sitting here on a Zoom and people are typing in, pastor, pray for me, pastor, pray for me. Where's the closeness? Where's the relationship there?
And we did, we switched, Christian knows this already, and it was January 2017, we decided to focus more on discipleship and community. Now, certainly discipleship can be done fairly effectively over the internet, but for us guys that aren't millennials or younger, this type of socializing is still awkward, right? So
Sure.
I don't know that we can, how does the assembly of the saints then fall into any new template, Chris? What do you think?
Well, Jim is right. When you're talking about this concept of people gathering just to get online and watch a guy in video, but I think everything that we're seeing, we see through the lenses of the American church model and the American church narrative. And so there's thousands of gatherings in China right now that have 2 or 8 people in there. They do not feel slighted one bit to be gathering. In fact, they're very grateful to be gathering in that narrative. And so what we see and what we view through an American church lens. And so in our mind, if we're not walking into an auditorium where there's a ton of energy, the music is pumping, the lights are flying, we're not getting an experience. We're not feeling it. We're not captivated. We're not in community. I will tell you right now that the reports that are coming back from our people are that it's some of the best community that they have ever experienced. And here's how the outline went. They went in, they sat, they had fellowship, they had a time of sharing. They brought people in from the neighborhood who had never been to Next Level Church but wanted to come in and sit in on the church, on the gathering there. So they had time of sharing. They prayed over one another. They went into the message, they watched the message, they journaled, turned the message off, discussed the message, went into time of confession, had communion, and then broke bread together. I mean, that is an Acts. That is what they were doing in Acts. Now, here's something interesting, though, about the Church of Acts in the first century and where we are today. I hear people all the time who are vying for this house church model. And what they want to do is they want to, they're all against the mega church and they're against people gathering in big auditoriums, which is so stupid. There's no biblical reason for them. I mean, they just don't like these big gatherings. Yeah. And so they're fighting for this sort of house church movement, right? And so here's what they're doing. They're trying to force a people into a context. So they're taking the first century model of house to house, which, by the way, was a very short period of time. They're trying to take people, this first century church model and force people into that. In the first century, when they were going house to house, the context wasn't forced into the people. The people were forced into the context. In other words, they were in persecution. They were being scattered abroad. There was no place for them to meet. They had no choice but to go house to house. So it was foolish before the coronavirus in this crisis for us to try to take that context and cram it into the minds and hearts of people. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, we have a crisis that has now forced the people into a new context. And so I think that's what we're seeing now. Now it's there. And, of course, all these house church guys are just, they're smacking themselves on the back and giving themselves high fives because we've been saying this for 10 years. Yeah, but you were doing it wrong. We had no choice to do what we're doing, right? And so the people responded, the church responded, and by the way, in a very clever way, in my opinion, to what we're being forced into. Now, we're going to all be released from this. I'm telling you, and you guys know this, we're going to get released. We're going to be able to go back to our gatherings. It's going to happen, whether it happens on Easter, the end of April. At some point, they're going to remove this from us. We're going to gather again, but there are going to be people who are going to rise up with this, say, hey, you know what? I'd love to continue my house church. I think that's where the pastors and leaders have to say, how are we going to respond? Are we going to continue to say, oh, no, you need to show up here. You need to be here at this certain time. This is your campus. Bring your tithe dollars here. Pay for us to keep this going. Or are we going to start empowering people to become marketplace apostles? That's where I believe we're supposed to be responding.
And I want to jump on this for a second. Okay. What was your first mega church? What was your first mega church? It was in Acts. The first 1,000 people were baptized that day, saved and baptized that day. There's your first mega church. I mean,
that wasn't a church. They were actually people gathered in, and then they all scattered out.
Yeah. Let me finish what I'm saying, though. They didn't have the capacity in this time frame. You're exactly right, because that was the model. Because they were scattered. They were all the different. I mean, they weren't in one location like we have. It wasn't a metropolitan area like what you're talking about. But it doesn't say anything. I agree with you. It doesn't say anything about not having a large gathering. But what I do want to say is that our churches believe in small groups. And I agree with you 100%. Monday night, I belong to a small group. We have 15 to maybe 22 people show up. It's incredible. We get to fellowship. We get to talk about Christ. We do our study, our Bible study, all these things like this. We walk away feeling we can conquer the week, because really, when we come into church on Sunday, I love our pastor. I love his teachings. But when I walk out the door, it was fellowship more than anything else. Then when we get into the small groups and start to really he has. We had a guy one day get really mad because he felt like the pastor was talking down to him. And I said, what you have to understand is he is talking to the masses. He's not talking to you individually. If he were to pull you aside individually and had that opportunity to talk to you about something, it would be a whole complete different, subject. But on Sunday morning when we go, it's the fellowship. It doesn't have anything really. We have nights where we just do nothing but sing. It's the fellowship. It's the worship. It's the praise. The pastor gets up and gives us some good words, and he does. Johnny Scott, my pastor, love him to death. Just, could listen to him all the time. But I know that he is, because when we get finished and I have an opportunity to talk to him, he says, I'd love to have said that, but some people wouldn't understand that.
Yeah.
That's why we have small groups. We can dig in deep.
And then you can match levels.
Well, I think, Jim, you're 1,000% right. The churches that do small groups well are going to be fine. Here's the, again, I'm going to go back to what we said. I don't know if we were on live when we were talking about this, but when you ask people to change and shift their patterns for 6 to 8 weeks, they automatically form new patterns. And so one of the things that the church is going to be fighting is getting the momentum back. I don't know where you go to church, Jim, but all churches at some level, if they're a moving organization, if a living, growing organism, there's a momentum behind them. And so what we know is the momentum that we had before the isolation versus the momentum we have on the other side of the isolation are going to be fundamentally different. And so how is the church, the guys that I run with, talk with, that's the question that they're asking is, how is the church going to respond? Because the momentum has shifted and it's going to be totally different. So what do we say and how do we get people to go? Are we calling them back to their old patterns? Are they going to automatically step back into those patterns, or are there going to be new ones? So for example, people that did all of their shopping retail are now figuring out how to shop online. So guess what that means? They're never going to stop shopping online. They're going to continue to do that. And I don't care how many things the retail stores have, they're going to be shopping online. I read something the other day where now all retail, in fact, Kevin, I sent you just a couple of emails to look over. Maybe we can discuss in this. But, retails are quadruple in their online sales now. And they're going, well, crap, this is easy. And, we could be just like Amazon and Walmart and these guys. And so, again, that's what I'm talking about. There's just something. The church is not going to be special and that it's not going to feel the effect of this, I think is what I'm saying. So what is that effect? What does that mean? So, how will pastors and leaders respond?
I think you have two different groups in this, or two different camps in this. You're going to have see, I'm older than both of y'all. So you're going to have me that wants to go back and do the fellowship, because that's how I grew up. I feel the Spirit leads me to that so that I can fellowship with people that I'm not in my small group with. Yeah. And so I can't wait to get back inside the church. But then you have those that are part of maybe you want to call them the millennials, or however you want to call them, that see this as an opportunity. But like you said, you kind of said it earlier. You said, hey, I can sit here and watch church and not feel guilty about it. Is the Spirit really moving that person? How do you learn more without talking to other people about what you just heard? If we just sit around and isolate ourselves and listen to somebody and then don't talk about it later on, what did we really learn in that? And how do we use that?
That's carnage. Yeah, that's spiritual carnage. If we isolate in our homes around a computer, we're dead. I don't believe that that's going to happen, or the call. I'm talking more about how do we get on top of this where we're empowering people to. So I'll give you an example, Jim. One of the things that we started doing is we started calling mom and dad in our church the pastors of their home. And so every Friday night they were getting their family together and they lead their family through communion. And we have a whole thing that we do, and that our families were walking through. Well, then they start inviting people from their neighborhood or people from their work. So again, I think the response for us is not say, "Hey, it's okay, stay at home." I think that would be devastating. I think what we're saying is how do we empower people to become real marketplace apostles and marketplace ministers? Because really, the first great awakening of the world in the New Testament was it birthed in the marketplace. In fact, the Church of Rome was not started by there's no history of any apostle as far as the 12 disciples or the apostle Paul as the founder of the Church of Rome. The scholars believe that it was people who were there at the Pentecost who got saved because they were traveling. They went back to Rome and they were marketplace leaders. They were guys like you, it was the Jim Howards of the world who got his family. They came together and they started the church. In fact, Paul's first letter to the Church of Rome was for two things. Hey, I'm validating that you're legit, and I'm writing to give you authority because there's no apostle that's overseeing you.
Right.
And so something empowered them to go there and start one of the greatest movements in the history of the world.
Well, I don't think I got Dave Snyder, by the way, commenting on our YouTube thread. And Dave's a guy that's he's in a wheelchair, but he does make it to church. Hasn't been around a little bit, but he does make it to church. And he does make it to the men's gatherings every month. But for him, he's saying that isolation. He's been working from home for 15 years. So that isolation between not working in a corporate setting and then not going to church now, psychologically and spiritually, can be overwhelming. So it would be someone like me who struggles, who's always attended 12-step meetings, to stop attending those meetings. I can get sick before I realize it. I can be so out of sorts and need to be redirected or interrupted in my self-will by attending those 12-step meetings. And I think it applies the same way to people in church, that the lack of fellowship can send you, by the way, in a lot of different directions. So do you see the new church model maybe being heavy on discipleship, heavy on teaching, and then turning them out? Because the first century had the church in Jerusalem, had the church in Antioch, but that was kind of it. Everything else was pretty small stuff. Ephesus, grew amazingly considering how much trouble they had. But there were hubs even in the first century, but like you talked about with Rome, they flourished of the Spirit over there. And I don't see why that couldn't happen. But then what role does the church play in post Corona? Is it going to be straight up teaching and discipleship and building up disciples like we've been talking about for 3 years, Chris? You think? What do you think that looks like? What role are we, a hub now? The churches that can't afford to kind of do what we've been doing for 3 years, they're going to be in big trouble. How do you generate income? But yet beyond having plugging in gyms, the problem is if you have a 30% unemployment rate, people aren't coming to work out either. So that's not going to work.
Yeah, I understand that. We have a school going there too, and so if the schools are doing it at home, we're not getting it there also.
Yeah.
You do have issues here.
So there are things.
This virus is a one-off. I think what Jim said a minute ago is so critical that I wish other pastors would listen to and press into this, and that is, hey, we're looking at our campus going, why are we going to have this beautiful, gorgeous campus on all this land and only open it up 1 or 2 days a week? How can we generate income? That's the right thought. Like, how do we turn this into a marketplace industry? And again, that has been there's been a negative concept or philosophy that is centered around that. But I don't know where Jim goes, and I don't know who his pastor is, but that's brilliant. That's genius. That's what the church should be doing. It should be a 7-day-a-week happening. I mean, why can't we have stores, coffee shops? Why can't we have daycares and CrossFits and all of that going on? I mean, I get it that that's a lot of things going on a campus, but I mean, we're talking about generating income so that when these types of things happen, something goes on in the economy, the church, again, is always the first to feel it. We have surplus. We have, again, we're generating money. This is why I believe the Apostle Paul never took money from the church. In fact, he once said, hey, I could take the money and I'm worthy of the income, but I'm not going to take it because I have a development company. And I'm not giving that up. I make my own way so that so the church can be blessed.
Right.
And again, that's something that is genius. I wish, more people would press into that concept.
Well, the thing that worries me, while we kind of hash out what tomorrow may be like, and we're of course projecting all of this, but the people in our business, in the church business, need to be having this conversation and need to be getting ready for this. I think people need to come back. I think I agree with Dave Schneider that there is something about that community, and Christian will testify to. I used to look at Sunday like a burden, right? And when we were overwhelmed 3 or 4 years ago, now I look at Sunday. I can't wait to get dressed and get out there and see everybody and say hello to people. And that wasn't always my personality, but I did grow in that direction. So what do we do? What do we do for folks that they can listen to any sermon they want on YouTube? I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. What kind of message are they getting? How are they able to, if they're young baby Christians, where do they get the discernment to eat the watermelon and spit out the seeds when you hear, say, I don't know, Steven Anderson deliver a message? We don't want people to be chasing, wandering around aimlessly through their Christian walk. They need to be discipled, and like I was, and like we've all been. There is a need for that community within the church, and that could get pretty tricky. And a lot of the churches that are thriving now on their payroll and their beautification of the campus and their high overhead churches are going to be in big trouble. I mean, I don't see even their huge corporate donors going to be in position to really do that for a year or two.
I want to jump in on a couple of things there and kind of make this perfectly clear. You know, when you talk about listening to other pastors and things like that, you can go out on YouTube. I mean, you know it yourself,
yeah.
And you can listen to 100 pastors all day long. The thing of it is I'm dedicated to one. Now, when I was driving to work out at Bel Air, I used to go out there. I would time it so that I'd catch David Jeremiah, because he's just one of these guys that I really enjoyed and would listen to. But the thing of it is, when we had our problems at our church, it was my church. And a lot of people were leaving. And like the first question I would ask them is, well, where is God telling you to go? Well, I don't have a church yet, but I'm just going to leave. And I'm going, why are you leaving? Did God tell you to leave? I couldn't understand that. I mean, if God's not telling you to leave, then why are you leaving? So when you talk about some of these people get online and start listening to pastors, different pastors and things like that, I'm kind of loyal to the guy that I listen to. Now, do I like to hear other pastors? Sure. I've been to Passion. You know, I go with the kids every year and we do those things. And I love listening to these guys and they fire me up. But the thing of it is I know where God has placed my heart and where my heart stays. Kevin, I'm like you. I can't wait to get to church. Yeah. I can't wait to go back. I'm looking forward to the first time that we get to go back. I'm afraid that the social distancing isn't going to work because I'm going to be wanting to hug everybody I see. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know, because it's that fellowship. You know, Dave, and say hello to Dave. Dave was exactly right. When you work at home like I do, okay, the social isolation that starts to happen here sometimes drives you a little bit insane. Yeah. And it also causes you to wonder a little bit. And those are things that we truly have to be careful with, because if we start to wonder, where do we end up? You know,
that's exactly right. And I have a tendency towards isolation as a character defect. You put me in this environment where they're telling me to isolate. You know, I struggle to do social things most of the time, and I'm generally glad I do it. But to go out to dinner with a bunch of people, I'll start, if it's at 7 o'clock, I'll start talking my way out of it in my head at 4. You know, and I have to force myself to do it. And then I'm usually glad I did it. But there are people like me that this environment is not healthy, right? This is a very dangerous place to be. Now, Christian and I talk doctrine and theology all the time, but not everybody has somebody like that, you know. Could get dangerous.
Well, I think it's important we realize too that isolation is anti-gospel. Isolation is self-serving. It's self-preservation, and so that's anti-gospel. And so we're not supposed to. I mean, that we were called into community. We were called out of the world into the community of the church, and so. It's a devastating blow. I got to be honest with you. I've said this multiple times, and I can't. There's no data or science to prove this, and so this is just me giving an opinion. But I think this is 70% spiritual and 30% physical. It could be even higher spiritual. What we're dealing with right now, because the enemy knows what isolation does to people. The enemy knows that it is an enemy to isolation is an enemy to the gospel. I mean, whenever there is a crisis, this is why Jim's job is so important, because people move to self-preservation. When you move to self-preservation, all you're looking out for is your own needs and your own care and your own concern. We get selfish, we become hoarders, and all of those things. Again, all anti-gospel. And so the attack on the church is not on our offerings. It's not about people not sitting in the pews or sitting in the chairs. The attack on the church is on the people who, if again, and I think all of this conversation rises and falls on how long they continue to call us into this isolation. Here's the question that I'm asking, that I think, Jim, you and your leaders and everybody, I think we all need to be asking is, what if they say to us, hey, we can't get a handle on this, and we're going to call you into this for 4 more months or 5 more months? At what point does the church go, let God be true and every man a liar? This is not enough. We can't keep doing this because this is anti-gospel.
Yeah.
Now we're talking situational ethics versus a moral thing that we're called to under, the law of God.
Yeah. We almost have to do it.
Well, and let me just go with this. The state of Texas did not tell churches not to meet. Our governor is the one that kind of came out and said, hey, if you have over, 100 people, please don't get together. Well, there were people that were kind of like saying, wait, you can't take away my First Amendment, which is the right to assemble.
Yeah.
So the government was very careful on how they worded that. It was a volunteer type thing. I was a little surprised, and I'll be, I hope I don't step on anybody's toes, but I was really surprised that we jumped on it so fast. I mean, I'm just thinking, Satan, you want to get a hold on, like you're talking, Christian, you want to get a hold on, those that are halfway deciding whether or not they want to go or not. Hey, I don't have to go. I get into that pattern. You said so many weeks, it becomes a pattern. We talked about if you work out 21 days, you get into it becomes a pattern. You want to work out. So if you're not going and getting fed and you start to get weak, you don't go. I
texted a lot of people. Of course, Christian and I talked about it quite a bit, but I texted other pastors, are you meeting this Sunday? Are you not meeting this Sunday? What's your thought behind that? I saw a lot of stuff on social media that churches that weren't meeting were living in fear and not in faith and things like that. Well, and to me, we're called to live. We're called to live fearlessly, but we're not called to live foolishly. So it's fearless to jump out of an airplane. It's foolish not to take a parachute. So somewhere you've got to draw a line for protecting the flock that we're called to shepherd, right?
Well, let me just add to what I said, though. The reason why I feel like the churches did it was to show that they were good stewards to what the government was asking. It wasn't one of these things where they were afraid of the virus really getting into the church. It was just that the government had stepped forward and said, would you please not do this? Yeah. So what do? We lead by example.
Yeah.
But then, immediately with our church, we started getting on the social media platforms and saying, okay, here, you can go get Zoom through us. You can do this, you can do that, hold your small groups on Zoom. And we immediately started doing that. But I can't believe anybody that would say, oh, I'm not going back to church. In my life, in my walk, that would kill me. I would be looking for Christians to hang out with,
Yeah, you're not gonna have that across the board. You're gonna have. I told my wife last Sunday. I woke up real early, 3:30, 4 o'clock Sunday morning. I was in a time of prayer and worship, and it was an emotional time because I miss my family. I miss the people that are my family that we love dearly, and it's painful now. It's becoming painful to be away from them, and I'm wondering about them and asking questions. But again, everything that's happening right here, guys, I believe this is we are in a perfect storm right now for there to be an awakening, a revival and an awakening in the church, or complete carnage. And I think, again, it's all in how the leaders respond in this. And so all of it rises and falls on how long they're calling us into this isolation. The president said last night or night before, I want the churches to be filled on Easter Sunday. Good luck with that, because the doctors and scientists aren't going to let him do. That's a wishful thinking. But if they don't have a cure and their case is still going, they're not going to say, "Hey, yeah, good idea. Let's let everybody go back and get." They're not going to do it. But if they start saying this, 30 more days or 60 more days, at some point the church is going to be forced to respond. And, I'm going to say something that may step on some toes here, and I don't mean to, but, a while ago, a couple years ago, it was the hot subject was the subject of, where are we going to stand on the subject of sexuality, homosexuality versus heterosexual? And that was going to be the major issue in the church and all that. And of course, in my mind, I'm always like, the things that people think are the most obvious are typically not the things that ever become the actual issue. It's what you don't see coming that becomes the issue. And here we are. Overnight, guys, the Father pulled the rug out from underneath the American church and the model. The rug just got pulled out from underneath our model. And so we can't just go back to life as normal and say, let's just keep doing what we were doing. We have to say, Father, what is it that, here, remember this, guys, whenever there's an interruption, it's always followed by a disruption. Disruption is always followed by pain. Pain is always followed by hope and change. And so what is the Father trying to do right now in the church to get us back to a place where, again, we're tearing down these cult of personalities? It's not an entertainment center. People aren't walking in for an hour and a half on the weekend, getting their God on, going home, and there's no transformation in their life. How do we keep from going back to that scene? Yeah. And so I think, again, these are some of the major questions that we have to be asking and pressing into as this continues to unfold.
If we consider why people go to church in the first place, I mean, Christian, you and I both know people come to church sometimes when they run out of money. They come 2 weeks in a row, then ask us for money, right? People come to church because everything's going well, and our economy was cranking. I mean, everything was perfect 3 weeks ago. I mean, things were very good 3 weeks ago. Add to unemployment, add to being home with your kids all the time, add maybe needing government support to feed your kids and take care of your kids for the next year or so. Where do we, you think that drives people? And I always say that you have a choice in every conflict to move towards the light or away from it. What percentage of the people that we're seeing in our churches now, because things are going great, when they've got other things in their mind, they're gone? Are they just, I mean, we're talking about the American church here. We're not talking about, the first century or the church in China or Iran, where they're absolutely committed to assembling. I think that under the kind of pressure that we might be under for the next 6 months or 12 months, it's hard to call which way people will go. I mean, a lot of people that come to our church come because they need money. A lot come because it's fun, right?
Well, I think, again, if you look at every major crisis throughout history, it was always followed by some sort of a revival. I'm not going to call them awakenings, but I mean, let's just look at the United States of America in 2001 when 9/11 happened. After that, there was a period for a year or so after the churches, we couldn't get enough seats out. Yeah. People were coming, they were looking for hope. They were looking for truth. They were in search for something. And then, that year passed and we slipped right back into the normalcy syndrome. And so this is, crises typically leads to people wanting to know the truth and seeking God. Here's the problem for America. It ain't gotten that bad yet.
Yeah.
People are still paying their bills for the most part. People are still buying food. People are still shopping online. People are right now, this is just a little vacation. They're not calculating the fact that we've lost $11 trillion in the markets in 9 days. Now we gained $1 trillion or $2.5 trillion back in the last 2 days, that's insane and awesome. But, we've lost $11 trillion. The unemployment rate is going to climb. So the effect of this is going to be felt, 6 months from now, 4 to 6 months from now. Right now, it's a bit of a party. I mean, look at all the online conversation that's happening. It's hysterical. Yeah. People are having fun. They're,
I'm making light of it 10 times a night.
They're making the best of a really crappy situation because we're humans. We adapt, we evolve, and we're really good at it. But there's going to come a point when that's going to end and that's going to go away. And what is happening right now is we're going to start feeling it. And that's when this conversation is going to become more real. Yeah. It's just not real in America. And we're going, crap, there's a crisis. We're quarantined maybe 2 more weeks. Everything's going to be good. That stretches out for another 30 to 60 days. I think things are going to drastically shift.
Well, we have Carrie Nicholas on commenting online. A couple of things. She says that the online fellowship been super important to her or him. Carrie, don't know which one it is. You don't have a profile picture. He or she says they say it's also a rough time to be a pastor. I think we can all agree with that. And the final thought is people tend to turn to God as a last resort. Are we could we see an influx? Like after, I wasn't even Christian in 2001, by the way. I didn't get saved till 2010. So do we see an influx like we saw after 9/11, or do we? I got to tell you, before all this happened, the spirit at our church was amazing, and I was getting phone calls from people that I would have never thought had questions. I thought they had made their mind up about God, and they're calling and asking me questions. I'm baptizing somebody a couple weeks ago that a few months ago told me she wasn't even a Christian. Did I mind if she wasn't a Christian? That is, there was a tremendous revival kind of boiling up already, and is that part of God's plan now for folks to be kind of needing God right now, or having time, even just having time to have the conversations or think about something as abstract as the supernatural or a creator God, stuff that we think about all the time. Maybe this is an opportunity for folks to really sink their teeth into that, and then the church plays a role because we are hopefully studied in these things. We can converse in these things with God and love first, rather than first you got to tithe, then you got to wear better clothes, then you got to cut your hair, hide those tattoos, then I can talk to you. We may be perfectly positioned for people to really want real answers and shed the sizzle for a little more steak. There might be a perfect time for that as part of God's plan. I mean, that would be amazing. Then how does the church position themselves for that flood of people that are going to have? Imagine, you have 150 people on Sunday, and then all of a sudden you've got 400 people, and 250 of them are brand new Christians. You got your hands full. You need those 150 people to help speak into those lives. That could spread like wildfire. That'd be amazing.
Well, I don't, being that I'm not into the ministry like y'all are into it, but I can tell you from a personal point of view that, Christian, this is the first time I've ever really heard you talk a lot, and I'm really impressed about what you're talking about as far as what you're seeing on your side, because as being a pastor. But I think one of the things that concerns me so much is that churches that were weak to begin with may die out after this. Churches that were strong and growing may all of a sudden see the big influx, the more people coming in, because just like kind of what you were talking about earlier, I can go out and I can listen to a pastor, and he may, my mother-in-law listens to our service, which is done live. She listens to all three of them. I mean, she just loves to listen to our pastor. Great, fantastic. But I still want her to have her own relationship with her church, which she does. But I guess what I'm getting at is, if I go to church on Sunday, the first Sunday that it's open, and my pastor doesn't just walk out on the stage, and I hate the pulpit, walk up to the pulpit and knock it out of the park, I might go back to listening to the guy that's online, especially if it's not a growing church or a dead church at that point in time. I think it's very, very important for the pastor to get together and say, what are we going to do when they come in? And not try to razzle dazzle or something like that, but really preach the word as to what we should be doing when these situations happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, 1,000% it does. And I think, again, that's one of the things the Father spoke to me this past Saturday when he said that these are the two interruptions that I'm bringing to the church, to the model and to the cult of personalities. And to that point, that's how people shop churches like we shop for gyms, or like we shop for school. What programs are they going to have? Do they have a coffee shop? Do they have a Nickelodeon center for my kids? Do they offer this? They offer this? Because the last church I went to had this, and this. And so that's why the online presence became so incredibly important. Here's the thing, man. I'm not against any of those things. I'm not against lights and big music, and I'm not against all that stuff. I'm not against the razzle dazzle. What I am against is that what has happened in the American church is that we have traded shepherds for CEOs. We have traded our gatherings for Fortune 500 organizations. And so the original intent of the church has been bastardized and I don't mean that it hasn't happened because men are evil, but it just, when the mega church movement began in the 80s, it was a response to the traditional orthodoxies, the Southern Baptists, and all the things that we were very familiar with, we grew up with in the 70s and 80s. They were responding. It was a young group of people responding to that, saying, we don't want to do this anymore. And it wasn't a rebellion. It was a walking out of orthodoxies and saying there's another way to do this, right? And there were crises centering around the church and that at that season. We're in the same thing. We're 50 years on the other side of it. It's time for history to now shift. Things are going to shift again. And so I think we have to be very, very careful, to Jim's point, where, hey, I don't like this guy. My pastor didn't come out and knock it out of the park. I'm going to go find somebody else who does. I mean, think about how incredibly shallow of a Christianity that requires. I love what Jim said, and man, he is so right on. And I would bring him into next level to teach this, because nothing better than having a lay person teach this. But when you're called to a place, God called you there. You don't leave until God says it's time to go. It doesn't matter if there's a crisis happening in your church. It doesn't matter if things are not going perfectly well. It's called life. That's what we do. I'm not going to just step out of this place because I was called to not be served, but to serve. I have a role here, and until God changes that or ends that, I'm not going anywhere else. And unfortunately, we don't live in a world where commitment matters like that. I mean, for crying out loud, the divorce rate is 52 to 53% right now in the church, in the Christian church. So we don't even know what commitment means. And so that's part, again, why I say this is a perfect storm, in that people are not committed. They're not deeply committed. They're not theologically grounded. They're tired of being told they have to show up at a certain time, and the only time that they're going to meet God is if they show up to this campus at this time. That's where they're tired of seeing all that. And so they just realize, well, shoot, there's a whole new narrative here.
Yeah.
How do we keep that narrative going? Well, that's what I'm trying. So I believe that is the interruption that God wants to bring, so that pastors say, hey, what would it look like if we started to raise up? I'll tell you something, Jim, we started doing in our church. I told our staff in 2019, in 2020, I'm only going to speak 25 times. We spent 2 years raising up other leaders, lay leaders, who are communicators, to speak and to preach, so we don't have a cult of personality at Next Level Church. I haven't stood on our stage to speak in over 2 years. I'm on the floor, on the ground with our people, with a podium, done that for over 2 years. Again, I don't care that other people do it. It's just something the Lord called us to do, because it's not about me and me being on a stage. It's about the Spirit of God being manifested, so that when the people of God leave, they go, God was in that place. Or when the unchurched walk in, they go, not, wow, great music, or holy cow, that pastor was really cool, but surely God was in that place. Right. We don't see that in the American church anymore. The model, here's what we've done. We've traded the shepherd for CEOs, the gatherings for Fortune 500 companies or organizations. We've traded manifestations and the power of God for performance and programs. And so at what point does God pull all of those idols down and pull us back to the original intent of the church? Hey guys, remember, it's about me. Let me be lifted up. Again, I'm not speaking about all churches across the board, but you're involved in churches a lot, Jim. You know, there is a bit of that going on in the church, where it's become an entertainment center, and it's more about, hey, get in. Yeah.
Well, how many, this is a hard question for both of you. This is hard to consider, but are we going to see a culling of leadership? In other words, if we have a bunch of leaders that were making 50 or 60 grand a year, now not making 50, 60 grand a year, were they serving? Did they get used to serving for the money, or do they have a servant's heart? Is this kind of a John 15 pruning of people serving for the wrong motivation? I mean, our church is not a big deal because none of us get paid, but some churches might have 20, 30 employees. You know, that it's hard to think that people in a leadership position. And Jim, you say you're not a pastor, but you are. We all are called to spread the gospel and teach what we know. It just so happens that some of us, Christian makes some of us go to school for it. That's the only difference. What do we say? Do we see a culling or a cutting away of leaders that were in leadership for the wrong reason? That's painful to think about.
Well, and okay, I want to go back because I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way. I want to go back to what Christian said about the interruption. I think that this is, it's an awakening to me. We talked, Kevin, you and I were kind of talking about this. The three biggest states that's been hit by the virus, or three of the most liberal states out there, that homelessness is an epidemic.
Yeah.
So, we don't know whether or not the virus is spreading among the homeless. That's something that has not been told to us. But it's just kind of, when I look at it, I feel like we're reaping what we have been sowing for so many years. And the church has gotten, to me, and maybe this is why a lot of them have switched to the production. They feel like they have to do that instead of getting the word out. When Johnny Scott came to our church, I did not like him because he wasn't a pastor that had been there that the other pastor had gotten rid of. The other pastor, Philip Holland, I'll say his name, I loved him to death. And Johnny was completely different than Philip Holland as far as the way that they spoke. But I stood there and listened to him and said, this is a man of God. I mean, I was just blown away by several of his sermons that he was really preaching the meat, not just this bread and butter and this, hey, whatever society is pushing at this moment in time, let us take that and fill it into the church. Hey, if it feels good, do it. That's basically the way I felt like it was going. And all of a sudden, this guy is really preaching the word. And somebody came up to me because, like I said, I was still fighting this, tapped me on the shoulder and said, that's the real deal. Well, it's one of the elders that means a lot to me. And I just was, it was like I was convicted at that moment in time. This is the real guy. What are we teaching? This has been an interruption. I love that because maybe God is saying, we got to do something here, folks. We're kind of just like slipping, going down this slippery slope. So where is the response when it's over with? What is the response? Are we going to be listening to the guys online? They're going to be telling you to hang on to the television. You'll feel the power of Christ. Or are we going to be, are we going to be going to our churches going, we need to step this up? Yeah. Because the next time this happens, well, who knows? My job's going to be really, out here because we're going to have people that are going to be doing crazy stuff. They're already doing crazy stuff, but it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse.
And it's not so much, it hasn't been so much the virus as people's response to the virus that worries me. And Christian and I talked about it, but you see a break in the food supply chain and you've got a whole different creature out there now.
Look at the break in the toilet paper chain. Come on, really?
I don't even understand the toilet paper thing. And toilet paper tastes terrible. I've eaten it all already. I didn't get enough. So
one of the things that is happening that has to happen for us guys, and again, as pastors and leaders are evaluating this, is we have to go back and ask the question: are we truly empowering people? And so I want to keep. I'm not saying this just to beat a dead horse, but this whole cult of personality. Some of the most insecure leaders on the planet are inside the Christian church.
Yeah.
And you watch and see when somebody rises up in their staff or somebody rises up in their church who has any type of theological capabilities, communication capabilities, and people start to like them, they start to feel threatened by it, right? And so they don't want to not be on that stage 45 weeks out of the year. They don't want to not be, making all of the major decisions around everything. It's all built on a guy, on a man. And again, that was never the original intent of the church or the how God wanted the church to operate. And so I think we have to come back and ask the question: are we truly empowering people? And people showing up on Sunday is not empowering people.
Yeah.
Are we leading them to become leaders in the areas that they have influence? So where does it start? It starts with moms and dads. And so we said, we asked the question, how do we empower moms and dads? Well, let's let them start leading Bible studies and hosting communion in their home on Friday night. Man, you wouldn't believe, Jim, how many parents were like, you are nuts. This is way too awkward. I said, hey, embrace the awkward, push through it. And they did. And now it's flipped. Their kids on Friday night, some of the, the families, their children are the ones leading the communion now.
Yeah.
And it's, again, you have to start empowering people truly in the areas or, in the arenas where they are leading, then the next step is, are we empowering the marketplace? So like, for example, Jim is a marketplace pastor. I would call him Pastor Jim. And we, by the way, our Elite Warriors is an organization that we work with high level leaders all over the country who are, they run high level companies. We're training them and empowering them to become marketplace apostles. One of our guys owns 6 BurgerFis. He has over 340 employees. He's led almost 300 of them to Jesus. They marry, bury, and baptize right there in their 6 restaurants. It's insane what they do in these BurgerFi. So are we truly empowering people to take the word and to teach other people? So not just become a disciple, are we empowering them to make disciples? Yeah. And I believe that is the real litmus test of the vitality of a church, not how many people are showing up on Sunday. I am so over that. We were doing that forever. It was a game, not a game, but it was like, let's see if we can get 1,500 this week, and let's have a big day where we can get 2,500 on this weekend. And it was just a constant push to see how much we could swell the building. What would it look like if we started to make the litmus test? Are people really becoming, there's their life transforming, and are they out in the marketplace making disciples? In fact, Paul, whoever said it in Hebrews, whoever the writer was, I believe it was Paul, but he said, by now you ought to be teaching. Right. But because you're not teaching, you've lost what you had. I got to come back and start all over again. And this seems like that's what we're doing every weekend. It's like we got to start over, and we're dredging through it every weekend because we're not empowering them to actually carry it out into the marketplace.
Yep. And are they applying it in their lives? And I think evangelism is a program of attraction. If you don't have something you want the other 6 days of the week, doesn't matter what you tell them. If you say one thing and act another way, and I've been guilty of this years ago in my own life. It doesn't matter what you say, but if you are then living the gospel, if you are the only gospel they're exposed to, I've seen it in some of my kids. They text me that you wouldn't believe who texted me and asked me about this and asked me about that. It is a matter of living that gospel all the time, and so you get to even leadership that you can do the right things for the wrong reasons, right? So you could make a god of your sermon. You could make a god of your church building. Everybody I work with on a one-to-one basis, I tell them first thing, I'm not trying to put you in relationship with me. I'm trying to put you in relationship with your Creator. We have a tendency in the 12-step programs and in churches to deify the leadership, deify sponsors and mentors, and that is it cannot begin or end with Kevin, Jim, or Christian because you are the only thing worse than somebody that isn't saved is somebody that thinks they're saved and they're not, right? That to me is heartbreaking. So we're reaching the hour point. Do you guys want to make a closing point about any of this? That was a quick hour.
It was. My thing is that I just totally trust that he's in charge, and as long as I have brothers that Christian, it's just really great meeting you tonight for the first time and hearing you talk. And I'm looking forward to other conversations because, I have Kevin I can reach out to. I have my brothers I can reach out to. That's the core that we always do, to make sure that we lift each other up during these hard times and rough times. But it's all about making sure that we understand that God is in control and he has this. And we've got to trust him, no matter which way it goes. If it goes south, it goes south. He's trying to train us for it, Yeah. I always try to tell people, look for God in the scenario that you're in. Why did he put you here? What is it that he's trying to teach you? Because every single thing we do, whether it's driving from point A to point B, is a God moment to where he's trying to teach you something as it goes along. Maybe a little more, patience when the people pull in front of you and you're not flipping them off or things like that. He's trying to, he's trying to teach you something. So what is the teachable moment that he's doing with us right now?
Yeah.
Christian, I love the way you said it. It's an interruption. He wants us to stop and think for a second. Be still and know that I am here, What is it that he's trying to teach us at this moment in time? And we need to be paying attention to it because if not, we're going to lose. and I don't want to lose. I'm not a loser. And neither is Christ. And we know at the end we win. In the end, we know where we're going. We're not, we get to go to a place that's 1,000 times better than this, 1,000,000 times better than this. So why are we panicking? We shouldn't be. We should be looking for what is the reason and go with it.
Yeah, exactly right. Why is this? We got to stop looking at it. Why is this happening to me? And start looking at it like, why is this happening for me? What's my
What can I
opportunity
be
to grow
doing
out of this?
for you now, Lord, while this is going on?
Yeah. What role do you want me to play? What about you, PC? What do you have to say, buddy?
I mean, what Jim just said was it. I mean, that is the whole, in my opinion, that is what has to happen. Exactly what he said. We cannot go back to the normalcy syndrome. We cannot go back to life as normal. Whenever there's an interruption that is followed by that disruption, whenever that pain sets in, we have to say, what are we doing to lead to hope and change? And what is it that God's wanting us to change? Again, I think that we have to be careful to try to, I'm watching a lot of guys, I'm watching a lot of people, and I don't even mean in the church world. I'm watching a lot of our business guys. They're trying to desperately hold on to the model.
Yeah.
And I keep asking, what if God is wanting to shift? And are you willing to go with God somewhere different if he's shifting it? Are you willing to go? Because it's not my will, it's not my way, it's his. And so if we really believe that it's all about his will and way, then we're willing to go wherever he's leading us to go, which Jim hit something critical. You have to be still and know. God doesn't speak in confusion and distraction. So it's like, one of our guys, man, you'll love this. I'll close with a story. One of our guys is big millionaire, crushing in the business, and this has devastated him. Like, it's crushed his whole industry. He's laying off a ton of employees. And but here's what's fascinating. He's walking in hope, love, joy, and peace. Total hope, lots of love, filled with joy, and his life is total peace. And here's what he said to us. He said, because we teach an abiding course, Kevin, all about this, teaching people how to walk with, hear from God and everything. But he said, what the Father told me? The Father told me to take this entire season for however long this lasts and to rest and to listen. Now, this is a type A mover, shaker, get her done guy. I mean, when I heard that, I was under conviction. I'm like, oh, so, we type A guys can do this. Like, thanks for that word, bud. And, I need to hear that. And I receive that because I want to do that in my own life. And I'm impressed by that because of what Jim said. He said, I'm just going to be still and listen because the Father's clearly doing something to lead me in an entirely different direction or to do something. And I don't want to miss whatever it is. And so I think whether you're pastoring a church, you're leading a company, it's in your home. I mean, there's people watching your show who are moms and dads who are feeling this financially. So maybe the Father's saying, hey, it's time to stop consuming everything. It's time to not stop having no margin in your life or in your budget, and to start reevaluating your schedule, evaluating your budget. Who knows? But let's just take a moment to take a deep breath and to be still and to hear. So when we come on the other side of this, we're not doing life as normal. That's my biggest concern. I don't want to come out to the other side of this and go, hey, let's get back to the way we were doing everything. That's not what God intends in this.
And you'll never be successful if you go, to me, if you're walking outside of God's will or trying to lead the Spirit rather than be led by the Spirit, you're doomed. So the saying, don't just do something, sit there. I use it all the time because I am constantly compelled to run around fixing things and making sure everything's going to be perfect and that everybody's on point. And at the end of the day, this stuff gets done whether Pastor Kevin's watching everybody or not, right? It isn't the rows of chairs and the collection baskets and the water bottles and the people not misbehaving or anything like that the coffee's ready. It's that they're in community with their church family, right? And that they are receiving God's message personally and not receiving it just because Kevin said it or Christian said it or Ernie said it, but because God's speaking through those men to tell them something, right? So I want to thank you guys very much for being on the show. I'm going to switch the camera to me. We're going to wrap it up here in a second. I want to thank you guys, as always, for supporting the Godlogic Project. Folks are going to godlogicproject.com, shopping at Amazon anyway. If you're going to shop at Amazon, go to the godlogicproject.com first. You click on the Amazon logo, shop as normal, but it sends a couple bucks to the project. I don't need the money, so I get by just fine with some discipline anyway. So first and foremost, I appreciate you supporting the Godlogic Project. Share, comment, like, do those things. Of course, subscribe. But I'm not. I think in this season, be cautious with your money, and I appreciate the support I get from you guys and folks. Becoming sponsors and project partners and those things. But for now, let's focus on you and your family. And I appreciate you guys being here. If there's anything you need, if anything I can do for you, you can message me at godlogicproject.com. You got somebody struggling with addiction, or you have theological or spiritual battles you're fighting, email me. I'll reach out to you, and we'll if I can't help you, I'll find somebody that can. I want to thank you guys again for being on the show. I want to thank you guys for watching. Until they love you today, God loves you, and so do I. Receive that. Be blessed, and we'll speak soon. Thank you.
Hello, God bless, and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty, and this is the Godlogic Project.
Shut up, Kevin.
We're shutting it down, boys.